Welcome to another ASA Abloy Academy webinar. Today's webinar is how to adjust Sargent hardware. My name is Russell Corriveau and I will be your lead instructor today. Just to give you a quick background on myself, I started with Sargent Manufacturing back in 1986. I started off as a tool and die designer. I spent the first 12 years as a manufacturing engineer in the factory. And about 10 years ago, they asked me to take on this position as training development manager. Today's session will last about 50 minutes, give or take 10 minutes. During the session, your lines will be muted. However, you can pose questions using the question and answer icon at the bottom of the page. We will reserve time at the end for your questions. This session is being recorded and will be available within 24 hours. Also within 24 hours, you will receive an email from ASA Abloy Academy as proof of your attendance to this webinar that can be submitted to your employer or one of the industry association partners, such as DHI or ALOA, for industry CEUs in lieu of a certificate of completion. Keep in mind, ASA Abloy Academy has over 50 online classes that are all available at no cost. And today's webinar was developed for those who already have Sargent hardware in their building. This webinar is not going to go over how to install the hardware, but how to adjust it once you have the hardware in your building if adjustments are needed. So the first one, which is always a big problem, is door closers. Because a lot of people don't truly understand how door closers work. And therefore they never actually get them to work correctly. So we're going to run through the basics of a door closer and how it's supposed to work. Basically, normally you have 5 adjustments on a door closer. At this end of the closer, you'll find there's a large spring in there, and this is how you adjust the door closer's strength. This will determine how much force it takes to pull the door open. Door closers are adjustable 1 through 6, and 6 being the strongest door closer, making the door very heavy, 1 being very, very light. And normally they'll come to you as a number 3 from the manufacturer. But this is how you adjust the overall strength of it. Next, you have the back check. The back check is critical. The back check actually slows the door down as it hits the 70-degree point. This way it doesn't slam into the door, into a wall behind it. If for some reason your door opens up, and say you don't have a wall behind the door and it's allowed to open up to 180 degrees, then you would just back out the back check valve, and therefore it would be allowed to swing even further. This takes place normally around 70 degrees. The next is the delayed action. This is the one option on door closers. Door closers don't normally come with this option, but you can order it. The nice thing about this will hold the door open for about 20 seconds. And during the 20 seconds, the door will close very slowly. But it's a great feature for hospitals and places where you're bringing carts and gurneys through because it will hold the door open. It's really not a great option for external doors because it will let a lot of heat and cold in. Our next is our closing speed. Our closing speed is from the 90-degree point all the way to about the 12-degree point. This should take at least 5 seconds as a minimum. Most installers install it for about 7 seconds, but make sure you don't want it closing too fast. According to ADA, 5 seconds is the minimum. And lastly, we have the latch speed valve. And this is probably the most critical because this is going to make sure that the door closes and latches every time. Because oftentimes you'll see the door closing very, very slowly, and at the very end, it speeds up. This is where the latch speed valve comes into effect, and this will overcome any weather stripping and make sure the latch bolts get pushed back and the door can close completely. This is the latch speed valve. As I just mentioned, according to ANSI A117.1, which is basically ADA, from the 90-degree point down to the 12-degree point, it must take more than 5 seconds. It can take 20 seconds, but it has to be more than 5 seconds. There's no maximum on how long it can take, but there is a minimum on how long it can take. Another very important ANSI A117 standard you should be aware of is that the maximum force to push open or to pull open doors other than fire-rated doors should be 5 pounds for interior hinge doors. So when you're trying to pull the door open, it should be no more than 5 pounds. Something like this could easily be measured with like a fish scale, where you put the fish scale on it, you unlatch the door, and then you pull the door open slowly. This should be under 5 pounds. As you see here, there's a special note for fire-rated doors. Fire-rated doors have the minimum force allowed by the appropriate authority having jurisdiction. What that means is say if there's a lot of draft in the building and a fire-rated door always has to close and latch. That's mandatory. And if you have permission from the authority having jurisdiction, and they say, yes, you can actually increase the force of that to make sure it closes every time, that is allowed. Okay, so you can do it, because don't forget, you want to make the fire safety is more important than ADA, because the fire-rated doors has to do with life safety. We're going to take a quick look at installation, because this can be important, and you can always just take a measurements to see if it's actually installed correctly. Because if it's not installed correctly, no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to fix the problem. So the first one we're going to look at is called a standard or a regular mount. It's always mounted on the pull side of the door. It's always mounted on the pull side of the door. And when you install this, the instruction sheets will give you options depending on how far you want the door to be installed. As you see here, under standard installation, that would have a maximum opening of 120 degrees. So if there's going to be a wall directly behind the door as it's opening, then you want to set it to here. But ultimately, you can allow it to swing to 160 degrees. And this is also going to be based on what arm is being used. But notice it changes to the location. Dimension A is from the center line of the pivot to the first mounting holes for the door closer. And you see it changes from 7 inches to 5 inches. So it does make a big difference. So if there's a wall directly behind it, it should be mounted at 7 inches, and this can easily be checked. And the arm should be 12 1/8 inches away. These are from the instruction sheets, and they can be seen on from the sargentlock.com website. Another important thing to look at, by just taking off the cover, you can tell which side the spring adjustments is at. This should always, for a standard or a regular application, this should always be away from the hinge. Okay, so it's always away from the hinge. When this is installed, the installer has a few adjustments that he can make on this. Normally, you're going to attach the foot to the frame shown here with the pivot point further away from the hinge. Okay, and what they do, the reason they do this, they give you 2 different pivot points, because the second pivot point will actually give you additional strength. So if you're not getting enough oomph to get the door closed, by just moving this over, it's a very small and simple adjustment. You can actually increase the amount of force that it takes to close the door, increasing the strength of the door. Also, a very important thing when you're looking at standard or regular applications, the arm coming off the frame, this arm here should always be at 90 degrees. If this is not at 90 degrees, it is not installed correctly. Keep in mind, when an installer first installs the arm onto the door closer, it comes off at 90 degrees from the door closer. Okay, what you need to put on is what we call the preload. So rotating it, as we show here, rotating it into its final position is called the preload, and that's going to make sure that all the valves take place at the right point in time. So that is critical, and that's going to make sure that everything takes effect properly. So once again, when you're looking at a standard or a regular application, you always want to make sure that this arm here is perpendicular to the opening. The next application we're going to look at is top jam application. Top jam application is good for exterior doors, and it retains about 80% of the closing force. And if you take a good look at it, basically this is the standard application mounted upside down with a different configuration. This will allow the door to open up to 180 degrees, and this is always mounted on the push side of the door. As you can see here, that the door closer is actually mounted on the frame itself. So you always have to make sure you have room on the frame to mount it. Okay. Once again, when you're installing this, the spring adjustment screw is going to be away from the hinge. This can be installed either way because these have spindles at both ends. So you can easily install this the other way and not know you've installed it incorrectly. And if the installer is not reading the directions, he can easily do that. So that's critical. So the spring adjustment tube has to be away from the hinge once again. And with Sargent, which is really nice, is we give you index numbers. Right in the instruction sheets, depending on how it's being mounted, it will tell you what index number you need. So here it's showing you for a left-hand door, the index mark, which is on the square spindle, is going to be on number 3. And for a right-hand door, it's on a number 1. By making sure it's always on the correct index mark, it's always going to help you with the installation. And once again, you need to make the final adjustment. This is called the preload. When the door is finally installed and everything's installed, this arm here should be coming off the door approximately at 90 degrees. Okay, this is going to make sure all the valves come in correctly. And this is the arm coming off the door closer, not the frame. Remember, with the standard application, the arm coming off the frame had to be at 90 degrees. With this one here, the arm coming off the door closer itself has to be at 90 degrees. And because it's mounted upside down with different dimensions, that's why it changes. But it still has to be at 90 degrees. The last application we're going to take a quick look at is the parallel application. Okay. First off, once again, with this one here, unlike the other two, the spring adjustment tube is going to be towards the hinge this time, not away from the hinge. The other two times it was away from the hinge, this time it's towards the hinge. So if the installer's not paying attention, he can actually install this either way. Once again, you always have to follow the index marks. So here we're showing you for a left-hand door, it's going to have an index mark of number 4, and for a right-hand door it will be a number 5. This simplifies the whole installation. With some manufacturers, they basically tell you to rotate the bottom spindle and slide the wrench on. By having the index numbers, you know you have it installed correctly. And once you make the final adjustments, this pivot point should be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches off the face of the door. If it's ever resting on the door, that's in the wrong position. That means the preload is not going to be there. So it's very important that you actually make sure it's 1 inch to 1.5 inches off the face of the door. The next thing I'm going to show you is one of the best videos I've ever seen that shows you what each of the valves does one at a time. When this video starts up, it starts up very quickly. And all the valves in this door closer are actually all open right now. So the door is basically swinging freely. Let's take a look. As you see, it smashed against the back wall and it's slamming here. So they're going to adjust one valve at a time to show you what each valve does. This is the back check valve. This is going to slow the door down around the 70-degree mark. It no longer hits the door, which is really nice, but it's still slamming and very loud. Next, we're going to adjust the latching speed. This is going to be the last little bit, the last 12 degrees of the opening. Okay, so at that point right there, the latching valve took over and slowed it down so it's nice and quiet. The closing speed has to be more than 5 seconds according to ADA. And there it's closing nice and quietly. Next is a delayed action. Nobody realizes how long 20 seconds is until you're sitting here watching it, or when the door is open and it's 0 degrees outside. So when you have the delayed action, it will hold the door open for an extended period of time. And keep in mind, this is great for interior doors where you're bringing carts and gurneys through, but exterior doors, you're letting a lot of heat or cold in. And then you get the polite people trying to pull the door closed for you. But this gives you a real good idea of how long 20 seconds is. It's a lot longer than you realize. When you say 20 seconds, it's a while. And that shows you what each of the valves does. Each of the valves, how to adjust it. Next, we're going to show you another quick way. The door closer, say if you have a door closer already installed, but you want to make some adjustments because it's slamming or something's not adjusted correctly. Next, we're going to show you how to make sure that all the valves are taking place at the right point in time, and how to do this quickly. And this is how to adjust door closer once it's already been installed.
The door closer that I'm going to show you how to adjust today is the Sargent 1431, but this would work the same way with any of our models with ASA Abloy, Norton, Sargent, Corbin Russwin, Yale. Any of those would adjust very similarly to this, as long as we have a back check valve, a closing or sweep speed valve, and a latching valve, and a power adjustment. So I want to show you today how I adjust a door closer to do a couple of different things. One, to get a visual representation of exactly what goes on in a door closer and how it functions. And two, how to really quickly and efficiently get to within my tolerances that I need for the door closer to function properly. On our back check side, our back check valve is here, noted by a B on our closer body. That prevents the door from slamming into a wall or a window, prevents wind from catching the closer and pulling on the arm unnecessarily. We're going to adjust that. The next, we're going to adjust our closing speed valve or our sweep speed valve, and also our latching speed valve. And we'll be able to demonstrate exactly what those valves do and how they function. The first thing we want to do is close all of our valves in our closer body, rotating them clockwise, so to the right,
Except for the
with
door.
our 1/8" Allen wrench. The next thing we want to do is actually open our door. So, didn't mention earlier, we need to do this with the door closed. So with the door open now, you notice that I'm putting pressure on the door, but the door's not opening. That's because I'm restricting oil from passing through the back check valve. When oil is restricted, the door doesn't open. I need to take my 1/8" Allen wrench and actually back that valve out. So a minute ago we turned it clockwise. Now we're going to turn it counterclockwise, and all of a sudden the door will start to open further. Okay, you can feel that cushion that we need. Now if I let go of the door, not touching the door right now, it's not going to close because I'm preventing oil from running through my closing speed valve. Take my Allen wrench and loosen my closing speed valve until I get that timing that I want. Now notice that the door closed to a certain point. Well, this last few degrees of our closing is our latch position. The door will not close as long as our latch valve is screwed in. So we need to back our latch valve out to allow our door to finish closing. Okay. So we're really close to having a perfectly adjusted door closer, but now we need to check it. So I'm going to forcibly push on the door to check my back check. Once we get our back check perfect, then I'll let the door close, and we'll actually use our watch to time the door closing from a 90-degree open position. Right there, the back check was a little too loose. So we'll give our back check half a turn and try that again. Right there, that's about what we want for our back check. The door did not stop abruptly, but came to a stop with kind of a cushion. That's what we want. Next, I'll open the door to the 90-degree point and actually time with my watch. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a little fast, so we'll slow down our sweep or our closing speed. Give that just about a quarter turn. We'll see what that gives us. And that's within tolerance. So very easily, very quickly, I was able to get this closer into a proper closing speed. We have a very nice cushioned back check, so we don't damage a window, a wall, a picture, or something like that on the other side. And I did not have to open and close the door 100 times to get it to that tolerance.
Okay, now we're going to touch on exit devices really quick. If you're not aware of it, ever since 2017, our ET trims for our exit devices, which is our external trim, have been field selectable between fail safe and fail secure. Right over here, there's a small little toggle that you switch, and that's how you can switch it from fail safe to fail secure. Don't forget, you're always ordering it as a fail safe or a fail secure, and Sargent will always supply what you order. But if you happen to order the wrong thing, it's easily field selectable. The other nice thing ever since 2017 is that it will operate on 12 or 24 volts right out of the box. This has the same EcoFlex technology that we put into our mortise locks. And these things are 95% energy efficient. And this has been third-party certified through Green Circle. Okay, so right out of the box, 12 or 24 volts. This is a really nice feature. Next, I want to touch on electric latch retraction. There's basically two types of electric latch retractions out there. The first one is a solenoid type. The second one is a motorized type. One thing to keep in mind, there are differences between these two. When it comes to the power supply, the solenoid type usually requires a controller. Okay, it requires a controller because a solenoid requires a larger amount of electricity to get it initially moving. And therefore, you need to have a capacitor in there in your power supply, and that's why they call it a controller. The nice thing with a standard motor, you can use anybody's power supply you want. The next thing you need to consider, here we go, is due to the large inrush, you have to consider how you're going to transfer the electricity from the door to the frame. With motors, you don't have any inrush, so you can use a standard electric hinge without any problems. Oftentimes, when you have one of the large solenoids, they recommend an EPT to run the power from the frame to the door, but that's a lot more door prep and frame prep. Also, solenoids are going to be considerably louder than motors, and motors are very quiet. The big advantage with solenoids is that they are faster than motors are. Motors are a little bit slower. Here's a quick little sound comparison between a solenoid and a motorized device. As you can see, the motorized device had a high of 55 dBs, while the solenoid had a high of 67. So it is quite a bit louder. And this is the reason why many manufacturers are now making their exit devices with a motorized design, because this is a better design. And this is the type of design that Sargent has always had. They have never had a solenoid operated electric latch retraction. The other nice thing with our electric latch retraction is that you have two different modes that you can use this in. You have either a power mode or you have a timer mode. When it's in the power mode, that means this third toggle here is going to be in the down position like I'm showing you here. If you're using it in the power mode and you're using it with a momentary switch is like a doorbell switch. When you press the button in, the rail will retract. When you release the button, the rail will become undogged. So it only stays in as long as you're holding the button in because it's a momentary switch. You can also use the power mode with a maintain switch. So if you want the door to be open from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, then you can just hit the switch, have it dog itself at 8 a.m. in the morning, and then have it undog itself at 5 a.m. And that's where you would use a maintain switch, or you could use that on a timer. This device also has what they call the timer mode. The timer mode, this thing has a 20-second timer built right into it. So if you're going to use the timer mode, first thing you need to do is you need to slide this toggle so it's in the up position. And that puts it into the timer mode. And you're going to be using the timer mode with a momentary type switch. The whole idea of this is when you initiate it with the momentary switch, the rail will stay in for a set period of time from 0 to 20 seconds. It's normally preset at 5 seconds, but you can adjust that up to 20 seconds. What this gives people the chance to do is gives them a chance to reach over and grab the door open. So if they have to, so they're presenting their card, they present their card, then they have to grab the door. By having it stay open for 20 seconds, it just gives them more time to pull the door open. If you use the timer mode with a maintain switch, the timer is not going to take any effect at all, so it's irrelevant. So you would only use the timer mode with a momentary switch. And this is how you adjust the timer from 0 to 20 seconds. What we're showing you right here on the back of this, and this is right underneath the end cap. So when you remove the Sargent end cap, this is what you see. And these 4 toggles here will adjust it from 0 to 20 seconds. The way it's adjusted right here, as you can see here, that is adjusted for 4 seconds. And that's how you can easily adjust that. One other very important thing I want to mention is that if you're going to be using this with a low energy operator, and a lot of people are using these with low energy operators to meet ADA requirements, where they can hit just a handicap button, it will the exit device is electrified, pulls in the latch bolt, and then the low energy operator would open the door. You have to leave enough time for the latch bolt to retract, because if the button is hit and the exit device latch bolt is still extended and the low energy operator is trying to pull the door open, the exit device is going to win every time. And you don't want to damage your low energy operator. So it's very important. And this is a delay that's built into the low energy operator that you can adjust. And this is a pretty simple adjustment, because you should actually be having your electric latch retraction controlled by your low energy operator. And if you're not aware of it, Norton's low energy operators, most of them have a 24-volt power supply built right into them. And if you're using a Norton operator with the Sargent electric latch retraction, you don't even need a power supply, because the power supply is already in the operator. Okay, that brings us there. The next one we're going to talk about is self-contained delayed egress devices. These are also known as delayed egress devices. We're going to be talking about Sargent's 59-. If you're not familiar with these are used all over in maternity wards, airports, you see them all over, Alzheimer's wards. What they do is they prevent someone from going through the opening for 15 seconds. After 15 seconds, the door will open up and allow the person to evacuate. This is great if someone's trying to steal a baby from a maternity ward that they can't get out. And it does have lights on it and a siren when it's done. Next, we're going to take a look at how this works. Okay, when you first power up your delayed egress device, both of the LEDs in the insert will illuminate red for 2 seconds, and the timer will buzz for a half a second. Then both LEDs will turn green for 2 seconds, after which point, if either one of the LEDs illuminates red, that's going to designate that it is in the maintain egress mode, which means that people can go through the opening. If either light is illuminating green, and right now you see that it's green on our drawing here, that means that it is armed and it will prevent egress and nobody can get through this door for 15 seconds. Okay, there are basically 3 different modes when it comes to delayed egress devices. There's the armed, which means preventing someone from egressing for 15 seconds. After the 15 seconds, they can get out. Then you have momentary egress. This is how you allow someone to exit without setting off the alarm. So they would maybe punch in a code or something, or you can just use the key on the insert in the exit device to set momentary egress. It will turn off the system for 5 seconds, but this is adjustable up to 40 seconds. And then it will rearm itself immediately after that, or you can leave it in the maintain egress, which means basically it's allowing you to exit. So in the armed mode, the armed mode is designated when the rail is armed. The latch bolt cannot be retracted by pushing in on the rail for immediate egress. If the rail is depressed for 1 second or more, the alarm will sound and initiate a 15-second timer. And then after the 15-second timer counts down, then it will allow free egress. Okay, so this is in the armed mode. The standard color for this is going to be the green LED. So when you see the green LED, that means it's armed and you cannot get through the door. Next is a momentary egress. If you're exiting in the armed mode, okay. If you want to exit, say if your device is in the armed mode right now and you want to exit momentarily, what you're going to do is you're going to stick the key into the cylinder right here, and you're going to rotate the key counterclockwise until you hear the second click. And then you're going to remove the key. The red LED will flash for 5 seconds, and that's the 5 seconds that it's going to allow you to exit. After those 5 seconds are up, it's going to rearm itself, and therefore preventing anyone from exiting. And this timer is adjustable. So that's the momentary egress that we're talking about. And you rotate it to the second click counterclockwise. And our last one is our maintain egress. So if you want to put your exit device into a maintain egress mode, which basically means to turn off the electronics within the exit device to allow free egress, you want to rotate the key fully clockwise to the first click and then remove it. The red LED will illuminate. And don't forget, the red LED will tell you that it is disarmed and will allow free egress. The alarm will operate, the exit device will operate like a standard exit device. So keep in mind, red means that you can exit, green means that you cannot exit. So say if you want to rearm your exit device now. If you want to rearm your exit device, then you're going to stick the key in the cylinder, rotate it counterclockwise till you hear the first click, and then remove the key, at which point the green LED will illuminate, designating that the rail is now in the delayed egress mode, which means it's in the armed mode and will not allow egress. Okay, so quickly, really quick on the colors, and these are standards, these are adjustable, and that's what we're going to go over quickly, because a lot of people do have a problem with green meaning armed and red meaning you can get out. So that can be changed. So the standard from the factory, green means that the device is armed and it's in the delayed egress mode and you cannot get out. If it's red, it means it's in the armed mode, right, in the disarmed mode, and it allows free egress. If the red is flashing, this means you have momentary egress, and that's adjustable, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that's for momentary egress. And then if it's red and green alternating with a loud horn, that means the exit device has been violated. Okay, and that someone has gone through the opening. And that means someone's going to have to come over with the key and reset it according to NFP 101. So that's what the different colors mean on that, and I'm going to explain how to adjust those in a moment. Next thing, I want to just go over some of the diagnostic features, because it's very helpful. It has diagnostic features. So right here, if you remove the end cap, you're going to see four little lights here. Okay, the yellow light will illuminate when the latch bolt is pushed in, and will turn off when the latch bolt is released. Okay, so, and this is a good way to tell if that switch is working. So once you've installed it, you push it on the latch bolt, that yellow light will turn on and off. The red light will illuminate when the push rail is depressed and turn off when the push rail is released. It's a good way of testing the push rail switch to make sure that's operating correctly. Next is the orange LED. The orange LED will illuminate when the door is open and will turn off when the door is closed. This is going to be attached to the door position switch. And the last one, and the green LED will illuminate when the magnet is magnetized within the rail and will turn off when the magnet when the magnet is allowing free egress, when the device is allowing free egress. Okay, so those are the basic devices. So when the device is in the armed mode, what you should see back here is only the green LED should be on. Okay, think about it for a second. When it's in the armed mode, you want the latch bolt fully extended, so it should be off. You want the push rail completely released, so the light should be off, and the door should be in the closed position, which means that light will be off. So you want only the green light showing. When you turn off the device, the green light will also be off. And this is how it's great for diagnostics if you're trying to figure out what's wrong, which one of the switches is not operating properly. Remember I told you you can make some adjustments to this? If you pull the insert out slightly, right here in this area here, you can see you have 6 toggles here, and these toggles adjust different things, and that's what we're going to run through next. Okay, so the first toggle that you see here, the first toggle that you see there is for the nuisance delay. Okay, so when it's on, there's a 1 second nuisance delay, and when it's off, there is no nuisance delay. We would always recommend leaving the nuisance delay on, because this way it will prevent someone from setting off the alarm immediately. If the nuisance delay is not on, as soon as someone pushes on the rail, it immediately starts the 15-second countdown. The next is the audible alarm with the nuisance delay. So if it's in the off position, okay, the second one is the nuisance. Okay, the toggle is in the off position, the alarm, so when the audible is on, so when you bump into the rail, you'll hear beep, and then the person will back off the rail. So normally what we'd always recommend is that you have both the nuisance delay and the audible delay on. So if the rail is ever bumped, the person is notified immediately and they don't set the alarm off. Keep in mind, if these are off, then the rail will go into immediate countdown and the irreversible alarm. The next 2 switches have to do with the momentary egress, depending on how long you want it adjusted. So the default is 5 seconds, but both toggles are going to be in the off position. By putting both toggles into the on position, this will extend the momentary egress up to 40 seconds, which is a considerable amount of time. Keep in mind, the reason why it's set at 5 seconds is because you don't want someone following another person through that opening. And this is why. The other optional times are 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and 40 seconds. And then right here, it shows you the little chart to show you how to adjust it and which ones have to be on and off. And the last ones, which are probably the most important, is how to change the colors. A lot of people like to use opposite colors. So if you want red to mean armed and green to mean maintain mode, so S2-5 toggle controls the color of the LED. If the number 5 toggle is off, then the default green will illuminate, showing you that the device is armed. If the toggle 5 is in the on position, you would like the red LED to indicate that the device is armed. So this will switch it. So by switching these two, by putting the toggle number 5 into the on position, it will show red, red meaning stop, and green will mean that it's not armed, allowing egress. You can also change which light is going to be on top. Okay, so what they're suggesting for a left-hand reverse bevel switch, you want to go to the switch farthest to the right, and it should be on the on position. For the right-hand reverse bevel, it should be on the on position, and for a left-hand reverse bevel, it should be in the off position. And this will put the armed button at the top. And you can see there is quite a bit to the 59 dash. The next thing we're going to touch on quickly is concealed vertical rod exit devices. Okay. One thing with concealed vertical rod is you have to consider certain things with the opening. You should always have an idea, if the exit device isn't installed yet, it's very important that you measure the gap between the very top of the door and the frame, because this gap cannot be too large. It's also critical that you measure the gap at the bottom of the door. Because if you ever have a situation like this, when the door is closed, you have an 1/8 inch gap when the door is closed between the bottom of the door and the floor. But when the door is fully open, you have 5/8 of an inch gap. This is not an issue. This will work out perfectly fine with this, and you'll have plenty of bottom bolt engagement, and it will not affect security. But if the situation is the opposite way and the floor is not even, so when the door is in the closed position, you have 5/8 of a gap there. But when the door swings completely open, you're only going to have an 1/8 of an inch gap there. That's going to be a problem because you're not going to get any latch bolt engagement because the gaps are too big. That means they're either going to have to flatten the door, they can install a threshold, or if it's non-fire rated exit device, you can remove the bottom rod for the concealed vertical rod to eliminate that. But that's one thing to be aware of. If the floor is uneven, it will cause a problem with the exit device and it will not operate properly. Okay, so this is a security issue when you have a large gap underneath the door, but when the door is fully open, you have a very small gap. Okay, as I was mentioning, you want to do this through the entire swing. Keep in mind, the purpose of this is a hold back button. Keep in mind, when the door is open, this button comes out. When the door closes, it hits the frame, and then it releases the bolts to shoot out. So when you first push in on the bar, the rods go in and they stay in. And this button will cause them to release. So when the door closes, it gets pushed in and the rods will shoot out. Okay, so this is very important that it hits the frame. Okay, so when you're adjusting vertical rods, you always have to do it with the rods. You want to adjust the vertical rods with the rail in the dogged position. So anytime you want to adjust the vertical rods, conceal vertical rods, always make sure that the rail is dogged. You can either do that with the cylinder dogging or with the hex key dogging, but you always want to make sure that the rail is on. Don't just do it by pushing on the bar, okay? And the reason, this is how you're going to adjust the vertical rods. So say if you have an 1/8 inch gap at the top of the door. Say if you have an 1/8 inch gap at the top of the door, which is what you want, you would make the top bolt flush with the top of the door. And therefore, you would have maximum engagement every time and it would never hit the frame, okay? And that would avoid marks like this, because right here, this is telling you that the bolt is sticking out too far and it's hitting the top of the frame and it needs to be readjusted. The second situation is, say if you have 5/8 of a gap at the bottom of the door, Then the way you have to adjust the concealed vertical rod is you have to extend the bottom of the bolt all the ways out a full 1/2 of an inch. So you have an 1/8 of an inch clearance between the top of the strike and the bottom of the bolt. Therefore, they'll never engage each other until it's in the undogged position. And this is how you would adjust the vertical rods for this. So you always have to do it in the dogged position so you push it on the rail and then you adjust it. And then once you install it, you should not have to do any other adjustments. Okay. When it comes to surface vertical rods, they are a little bit different than concealed vertical rods. When you're testing concealed surface vertical rods, the best way to do that is by putting one hand on the door and pushing on the bar. As soon as the door opens, release the hand on the bar and make sure it goes into holdback. It's very critical that it goes into holdback. See, with Sargent's surface vertical rod, there's only a one catch point for the holdback feature. So it's very important that this pin always drops into this spot to make sure it stays in the holdback position. Okay, so this is very critical. One nice thing with Sargent, it's easy to adjust the vertical rods because you can adjust them all at the center of the door. Here's a look at the center case chassis. With Sargent, because it's pinned at the center of the door, once you remove the cover, you just have to remove this little pin here, and then you can rotate the rod with your fingers. And the best way to do this is looking up at the top case. You want to rotate clockwise to shorten it and counterclockwise to lengthen it. Okay, so you can either extend the bolt up either further to get more engagement or reduce the engagement. Okay, so basically you have to adjust it. You put the pin back in, you align the holes again, you put the pin back in, and you do have multiple holes, and you have to test it again. Make sure it goes into holdback every single time. The most critical thing when it comes to surface vertical rods is you have to treat it like a little old lady going through the door. If you push on the bar quickly, it will always go into holdback without any issue. The things that you need to consider is a little old lady going through the door very, very slowly. And if she doesn't push the bar in completely so it goes into the holdback position, you've lost security on the door because the bolts will stay extended and the door will not close and latch. And that is a problem. So with surface vertical rods, you adjust them, you test them, you make another adjustment and you test them. The nice thing with concealed vertical rods, basically once you adjust it with it in the dogged position, you're all set there. And we'll touch on it really quick. With Sargent's mortise locks, if you're not aware of it, they are also field selectable between fail safe and fail secure. So when you have an electrified mortise lock, at the very bottom of this harness here, there'll be a little toggle here, and you can switch it from fail safe to fail secure. So right here, I'm showing you a mortise lock that's in the fail secure position. And if you take a look at the toggle here, it's all the way to the right. By just pushing that toggle to the left, you've now put it into the fail secure position or the fail safe position. So you can easily switch that if you order the wrong thing. And one last thing with Sargent, this 8200 series is a multi-function lock body. By moving this one green screw to these 3 different locations, you can make 5 different functions. Okay, and they all use the same cylinder cam. And the 5 functions are an office function, a classroom function, a classroom security function, a storeroom function, a storeroom function with no lever on the outside, an exit only function, a closet function, and another closet function. We actually combined our 3 most popular functions into this one lock body. So we have classroom, storeroom, and office all built into this one lock body. Okay, and that's all you have to do is move that green screw. And that brings us to the end of this presentation. I'm going to open this up to see if we have any questions. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today in this webinar. Hopefully you found it somewhat educational and enjoyable. This brings us to the end of our webinar, and I would like to thank you very much for attending the webinar today. Once again, thank you very much for your time and consideration, and please join us again for future webinars. Thank you.